where I'll present to you the results of Stage 4A of the ReQoL project. I will present the two versions of ReQoL that we have constructed. The first one is an item pool of 40 items or questions that will be used in the next stage, and second, a development version of 14, that's 1-4, indicative items. I will explain in detail the process involved in constructing these two versions of the ReQoL measures. To recap, from stage 1, our framework includes 6 mental health themes, which are activity, belonging and relationships, control and autonomy, hope and hopelessness, self-perception, and well-being. The 7th theme is physical health. In stage 2, we shortlisted 87 items or questions from a total of nearly 1,600 from various sources, which included other existing measures as well as the manuscripts from our interviews. In stage 3, we tested the wording of items with service users. We used these results alongside consultation comments to reduce the number of items to 61. The latter 61 items were used in stage 4A, which I'm going to report on. In parallel to stage 4A, we had 2 studies being conducted. During the development of ReQoL, we have been asked whether the measure would be suitable for use in population age 16 to 18, attending child and adolescent mental health services, that's CAMS, or any other mental health related services. While stage 1 did not include interviews with 16 to 18-year-olds, we felt it was appropriate to test the 61 items with this age group. We therefore recruited 17 CAMS service users aged between 16 and 18, and they were asked to comment on the relevance and wording of the items. The second parallel piece of work was a cross-cultural study, which involved 2 individual interviews and 2 focus groups carried out with Urdu service users or Urdu speakers in Bradford, and the items again were tested for relevance as well as wording. The results of these 2 studies will feed into making the final selection of items in stage 4A, as I'll come to later on. In stage 4A, participants were asked to fill in the 61 item questionnaire once only. Recruitment took place between the 2nd of March and the end of May 2015. During that period of 3 months, 2,261 participants were recruited from a number of settings. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants and staff involved in recruitment at 13 NHS trusts, 3 GP practices, 2 charities, 1 trial cohort, and a commercial online panel. I'm also delighted to say that all the NHS trusts have exceeded their targets. 59% of our sample were recruited from NHS trusts. 14% were recruited through a commercial online company or panel. They are people who have a self-reported mental health condition. We also recruited a sample of 200 participants who reported that they had no existing mental health conditions, either self-diagnosed or diagnosed by a clinician. This was mainly to allow us to compare ReQoL scores of those with mental health conditions with those without any mental health conditions. I am not going to report fully on the ReQoL scores. However, I am able to say that ReQoL is able to distinguish between a patient and a non-patient population. The majority of participants, 68%, filled in the questionnaire on paper. the majority of participants, those from trusts, were recruited face-to-face. We also have a proportion of inpatients. We recruited 57% female, and 12% of the recruited sample were non-white, and the average life satisfaction score was 5.4 for this population, while that of the general population is normally around 8. So in the general population, who have been asked these questions in various surveys reported nationally, how satisfied are you with your life today? People have, general population members have reported a score as high as 8, whereas here the average life satisfaction score is 5.4. This is really what we would expect, given that our participants are mainly accessing services. We recruited from a range of categories, with 43% in the range 26 to 50-year-old. We also recruited service users with a good mix of self-reported diagnosis. To reiterate, the aim of Stage 4A was to gather data on the 61 items from participants and use that data to further reduce the number of items. Factor analysis. First, we performed confirmatory factor analysis to test whether the data we obtain are consistent with the 6 original mental health themes we identified in Stage 1. Here, we are focusing on only the 6 mental health themes, as we know that the physical item or theme will be measuring something conceptually different to what mental health theme would be measuring. Second, we performed an initial exploratory analysis as well. So from the confirmatory factor analysis, there was no evidence or support for the 6 factors. I'd like to, at this point, just add that the analysis were carried out by 3 different researchers independently, and the results were in agreement. So, we found that there were no support for the 6 factors. Now, that is not to say that they are not important, but it means that taken together, mental distress, say, this is what we are trying to measure, is not neatly measured by 6 different themes as we saw it. Second, the exploratory analysis that we performed supported 2 things. Firstly, the existence of 2 factors, where factor 1 contains all positively worded items. For instance, I felt happy, I felt relaxed. And factor 2, which contains all the negatively worded items. For instance, I felt anxious, I felt panic. Secondly, we also had the second set of results that point perhaps to the existence of 3 factors. So these are the 2 factors I've already mentioned. So the negatively worded factors, the positively worded factors, and factor 3 is probably one which contains some of the belonging items, which kind of tend to behave slightly differently. So once we have agreed on the existence of 2 or 3 factors, we carried out a series of psychometric analysis using item response theory, parametric and non-parametric, and rash analysis. Each analysis identified the best fitting and the worst fitting items, and in all these analyses the psychometric properties of each item was recorded. On July the 13th, the scientific group was asked to make a decision regarding the final item selection. The scientific group is composed of the core team members, a number of experts, 5 clinicians, and 4 individuals who, with service user perspectives or service users themselves. The proposal was to come up with two versions of the ReQoL. First, version 1 is an item pool of 40 items that will be used in the validation stage 4B. So that is the subsequent stage of the project. The data collected in stage 4B will then be used to produce the final versions of the ReQoL questionnaire. It was not considered appropriate to finalize the ReQoL items without data on responsiveness, that is, where participants are asked to fill in the questionnaire at baseline and follow-up. And version 2 that we propose is a development version of 14 indicative items, and both of these items will be handed to the Department of Health in August after we have received your comments. So to select the items, 3 principles were established and used by the scientific group. First, items with no psychometric evidence were rejected. Second, we retain items in each theme that truly in order to truly reflect what matters to service users, as we established in stage 1. Finally, we wanted items that cover the breadth of severity, that is, items that can distinguish between those who are very poorly and then those who are in relatively better health. In selecting the items, we used first psychometric evidence produced by the item response theory and the RASH models, and we also used evidence from the qualitative works that have been conducted in the project. So that was the content and phase validity work conducted in stage 3 with adults, similar work conducted with adolescents and young adults aged between 16 and 18, and finally qualitative results from the cross-cultural study with Urdu speakers. So at the scientific group meeting, each of the 61 items was reviewed in turn alongside the psychometric and qualitative evidence. So this is what we came up with. So the pool of 40 items for use in the next stage 4B. And as we can see here, well-being theme is the biggest theme with 15 items. So out of these 40 items, 15 of them are positively worded and 25 are negatively worded. In constructing the 14 item version, we ensured that there were at least 2 items per mental health theme. The indicative list of items consists of an equal number of positively worded and negatively worded questions. The item pool of 40 items and the tentative 14 item versions are not presented here. You can review them in the consultation document, or for those not part of the consultation project, please email us on ReQoL, ReQoL @sheffield.ac.uk. So looking into the future, data collection starts in September for stage 4B for a period of 6 months. In general, we expect baseline questionnaires in the first 3 months and follow-up in the remaining 3. Our sample size is again around 2,000 participants. The 4 analyses we wish to carry out on these data are: first, responsiveness, that is, can the items pick up changes in health over time? Second, how does ReQoL compare with other existing measures? So these are other patient-reported outcome measures as well as clinician-reported outcome measures. Thirdly, how reliable is ReQoL? And here we're asking participants to fill in ReQoL at baseline and then to fill it in again in a period of a week or 2 later. So this is to test the reliability of the instrument. Finally, we want to establish whether ReQoL is suitable for use in various diagnoses. Last but not least, thanks again to over 3,000 individuals, participants and staff who have made this possible. And thank you very much for listening.